Good morning, church. A few weeks ago, Jason asked if I wouldn't mind filling in for him. He said he would had Mason's wedding coming up and just didn't feel like he would have time to put in the work that it requires. And then proceeded to tell me that Blake would also be out of town, Ryan would also be out of town, and I began to wonder if this was a kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel bone we have going on here. Denise Holland's home. I shouldn't say that about myself. She loves me too much to let me say that about myself. So you need to say that you was saving the best for last, but I'll let you decide what that case is. Nevertheless, I'm speaking this morning. So the theme of this year's camp, which had a lot of time and effort put into it, was overcome. This was meant to be understood as a statement. We will overcome. And we need reminding of this because life has a way of throwing a lot of things at us that aren't great. We have trials and hardships, tragedies, a lot of things that leave us feeling defeated, a lot of things that may leave us wondering why continue fighting because this seems pointless. As a church family, we don't have to look very far for that. We don't have to look very long for that. Our own families, our own friends, our own brothers and sisters here are dealing with tragedies and hardships as we do whatever it is that we can do to help in those times. And for those who feel like life has their number, we will overcome. It is hope for a better day to come. For those entrenched in the day-to-day battles, it is a reminder of the victory that is promised. For those who are currently overcoming what life is throwing at them, it is their victory cry. I like to listen to Mercy Me, their newest album is all I've really been listening to here lately. And the words of one of their songs, of course, come to mind where they say, "Don't give up, don't throw in the towel. Just remember who you belong to. Let me remind you how this ends. We win. We will overcome." The reason we can have such confidence in the face of such great trials and hardships is Jesus. God's own Son, our Lord, has secured for us our victory. He did for us what we were unable to do. The prophet Isaiah alludes to this in his writings. Israel is about to face its darkest times. They have long ignored the ways of God, and their kings have long ignored Him. Assyria is coming in, and really, this is going to be a long line of nation after nation ruling over Israel. But He gives reason for hope, starting in Isaiah 8, verse 20. It reads, "Consult God's instruction and the testimony of warning. If anyone does not speak according to this word, they have no light of dawn. Distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. When they are famished, they will become enraged, and looking upward will curse their king and their God. Then they will look toward the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom, and they will be thrust into utter darkness. Nevertheless, there will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, He humbled the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, but in the future He will honor Galilee of the nations by the way of the sea beyond the Jordan. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of deep darkness, on them a light has shone. You have multiplied the nation. You have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest, as they are glad when they divide the spoil. For the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian. For every boot of the tramping warrior in battle tumult and every garment rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for the fire. For us a child is born, to us a son is given. The government shall be in his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. And a child was born to all of God's people, and he is victorious. He is a light in the darkness. He is a liberator to those who are oppressed. He is a victorious, mighty warrior. Now, Isaiah gives 4 names that showcase just what kind of Messiah was coming. Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. When you hear the word counselor, you might think of someone along the professions of a psychologist, someone who gives life advice. Maybe if you're in school, you think of the man or woman who helps you with making decisions in terms of further education. And certainly in terms of that definition, Jesus is a wonderful counselor, but that falls short of what Isaiah is painting here. Isaiah is depicting a king giving counsel to his people, giving direction to those he is ruling. And not only that, but it seems to emphasize his ability to draw up strategies, these battle plans. He's an extraordinary strategist. And so we have this king who is leading us in the battle with a battle plan, and his plan will work. However, there are times in life, whether because of our circumstances, because of what is thrown at us, or maybe even just because of how radical the battle plan, we begin to wonder, does what Jesus say here, does this really work? Is the plan that's been laid out for us, does that really apply today? And so we stray from our wonderful counselor. But I wonder, do we stray because counsel we have been given is bad? Or rather, is it because we're not willing to see it through? In Matthew 16, we find Jesus with his disciples. The wonderful counsel reveals his grand plan, the master plan, what is to come. And Peter is not on board with this. He does not like the counsel he receives. He does not agree with the direction things are going with. And it just doesn't make sense for Peter. That's not how he would draw it up. And when Jesus tells him that the plan is for him to die, Peter pulls him aside and says, "This shall never happen, Lord. You're our Messiah. You're the one leading us. You can't die. This doesn't make sense." Jesus responds to Peter, "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Peter could not see the forest for the trees, as we would say. And when we question God's counsel, His direction, I wonder if it's because we're so caught up in the details of our own problems, if it's because we're so caught up in that moment with what is going on and how it consumes us, that we, like Peter, also fail to see the forest for the trees. Is God's counsel really wrong? Or is it that we aren't seeing what we want when we want it, and so we deem it bad, rather than actually putting our faith in Jesus and trusting Him to come through as He says? In other words, do we have in mind the concerns of God or merely human concerns? It's important to remember our response to Jesus is one of faith, not earthly logic. Faith asks us to follow Jesus. Logic asks Jesus to follow us. Faith says, "Yes, Lord," while logic says, "This shall never happen, Lord." Faith requires trust. Logic requires control. And Jesus, with all authority, with all control, has given us a victory by laying His life down for us. And now He asks us to do the same. Follow me. Relinquish control. Hold on to your faith. Lose your life so that you may find it in me. We're then given the title Mighty God, which is meant to bring to mind a warrior king as God's representative. We see in many ancient societies this concept of a king being raised up by their gods, being trained for battle, being given these special weapons that will lead them into a victorious fight. And that's kind of the image I think Isaiah is getting at there. Not so much necessarily the mythical aspect of it, but this idea that there's going to be a king who comes up and leads us into battle, and we will be victorious. Someone like David, they're looking at his throne already, someone to fill that spot. Someone like David who wasn't just a wise king, but also a strong warrior. That is not the plan that God had. But make no mistake, the Messiah would be a mighty God. We're given an image of a king who is victorious. We're given the image of a king who removes what was once oppressive to his people, whose might goes unquestioned. In Mark chapter 4, this is one of my favorite stories in the Bible, we find Jesus and his disciples in a boat. I remember 4 of them are fishermen by trade. They knew what it was to be on the waters in questionable situations. They knew when it was smart to sail and when it was smart to hang back and sail out later. They also were familiar with what it was like when you start out smooth sailing and all of a sudden you've got a storm that rolls up on you and there's nothing you can do but continue through it. And this storm was so powerful. We read that the waves were coming up over the boat. You kind of get the image of the disciples frantically trying to bail water out of the boat as quickly as it's coming in. It scared the fishermen even. They were afraid for their lives. It would be understandable for the others, but even the fishermen are now afraid for their lives. They understand what kind of situation they're in. They understand how powerful this storm is. And they're fighting as hard as they can. And it seems for nothing. And they begin to wonder to themselves, as Jesus is sleeping on the boat, they're fighting for their lives, and they think, does he not even care if we drown? And they wake him up and ask him exactly that. And Jesus gets up and basically tells the storm, shut up. And then something amazing happens. Something crazy happens. The winds begin to die down. The waves begin to calm. The storm ceases. And you can almost even see the light breaking through the clouds as you go from this incredibly terrifying moment to now just this serene, peaceful boat on the water. And what had once terrified the disciples no longer scared them. What scared them was now who was in the boat with them. Because they thought they had seen power. They thought they knew what unbridled power looked like, and now Jesus stands before them telling the storm to stop, and it listens. And they marvel, who is this? Even the winds, the waves obey him. There is no one or no thing that could question Jesus' might. Jesus had called them to a purpose. He was with them on the boat. And the storm had caused the disciples to forget that, it seems. That there was something happening bigger than where they were in that moment. And that Jesus was with them. And even though they forgot and felt forgotten, Jesus reminds them in a powerful way, I've not forgotten you. As he quiets the storm. And as I look back over my life, as I look at the storms that have come my way, and I can see how Jesus has worked through each of those, I'm left with a similar awe-stricken amazement. And then the words of Jesus sound off. Why were you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? See, it's important to remember this. Because while we may forget, while I might forget, who is inside of me and who I'm meant to be. It's important and it's good to be reminded that who is inside of us has not forgotten us. And that even the winds and the waves obey Him. There is no one or no thing that can question His power. He is our mighty God. The next title, Everlasting Father, we have to be careful with this one. We have to be careful not to read our own understanding back into the text. We have to be careful not to read our own interpretation back into the text. Because if we do that, we come to a weird conjunction where it seems as if Jesus, or as Isaiah is saying that the Messiah is God the Father, and we understand that Messiah is God the Son. So what does Isaiah mean by everlasting Father? While eternal definitely describes Jesus, He is eternal, I believe that this is not what Isaiah was shooting for. Now, we see this kind of language in the Psalms. Psalm 21, David speaks of God giving him life and length of days forever and ever. In Psalm 72, it's written of Solomon, may he endure as long as the sun, as long as the moon, for all generations. And the sentiment there is not, or the idea there is not so much that they will never die. They don't think that David and Solomon will live forever. But rather, it's a sentiment of a long reign, of an enduring dynasty. And the idea of a father is the image of a king who protects his people much like a father protects his own child. And we see this in Isaiah. In Isaiah 22, God is talking of placing Eliakim in charge. And in 21, He says He will be a father to those in Jerusalem and to those in Judah. So when Isaiah talks of a Messiah who is our everlasting Father, he's not talking about God the Father, but rather he's talking about a king who has a long and enduring reign, who watches out, protects His people. In John 10, Jesus once again demonstrates how this title applies to Him for years, for many years. In between the Old Testament and New Testament, I don't know if this was charged to them or if it was bestowed upon them, but for whatever reason, the leaders of the Israelites were the teachers of the law, the elders. Those were the ones who were leading these people. And we see that there are factions, if you will. You have the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the Herodians. I'm sure there are more, but those are the ones that come to mind. And there's a bit of a power struggle. Who's right? Who's really in charge here? And so their focus becomes on who is right. Meanwhile, the people are left to themselves. Who do we follow? Who do we listen to? Who's protecting us? And Jesus comes along, and in John 10, He makes it clear to the Pharisees that He is the true good shepherd. That they are merely hired hands who care nothing about the sheep. And when trouble comes, they flee and leave the sheep to fend for themselves. But that's not true for the good shepherd. No, He lays His life down for them. He's willing to die for them. And He continues on, I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Jesus knows us. And He desires us to know Him. He desires a relationship with us. And as I think about this, it's quite difficult to really express. As I think about who Jesus is, as I think about my relationship with Him, two very obvious truths come quickly. And that is, first, Jesus is good. And the second is, I am not. And I don't say that to bring us down because Lord knows we have enough of that going on already. I say that because it makes more important. It brings to light just how great our God is. Because despite knowing us, flaws and all, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between, He still desires us. He still desires to know us. He still desires a relationship with us, and He still lays His life down for us. The the closest thing, I guess, that helps me to understand this are my own children. No child has to do anything to earn the protection of their parents, to earn that comfort. There was a time just a while ago, Ellie has recently gotten her ears pierced, and we're finding out there's some metals she's allergic to. And so we had a little problem with her earrings one day, and it was hurting her, and I just had to hold her in my lap and let her grab my fingers and squeeze on them when she was scared. She didn't have to do anything to earn that. That's what I do. I'm her father. That's what fathers do. And Jesus is our everlasting Father. Just as the Good Shepherd lays His life down for His sheep, so Jesus lays His life down for us. He said He has the authority to lay His life down, and not only to lay it down, but to pick it back up. And that's exactly what He does at the resurrection. He laid His life down at the cross, and He picks it up the resurrection. And the beauty of that means that He lives. That this promise of protection and comfort, there's no limit to it. It's everlasting. It literally is eternal. So that when we say, "Long live our King," it's not hyperbole. It's not a wish. It's not hoping for something that we don't know will come true. This is a proclamation of our eternal Lord, of our everlasting Father. This final title, Prince of Peace, might bring to mind an image of someone meek, someone diplomatic, and that's kind of how we kind of seem to think of peace today. But Isaiah, the context that we see this in, diplomacy is not on the table here. Peace is established because there's no one left to challenge. His people are able to live in safety and prosperity because the enemies have been defeated. There's no one left to challenge that. And for the longest time, my understanding of peace was flawed. Because I used to think of peace as a lack of trials, or a lack of hardships, or a lack of tragedies, or a lack of bad things. Those things aren't present, so I'm at peace. But the flaw with that is, sin is in this world, and as long as sin is in this world, those things will exist. Even on a global scale, we think of peace as no war nor conflict. I know it wasn't alive during the time, but the song, all we were saying is give peace a chance. Beautiful sentiment, but it's unrealistic. Bad things are going to happen. Those aren't going away. So either peace can exist in the presence of those things, or peace does not exist at all. And I believe that peace does exist. I've come to understand peace differently. Peace can be obtained in spite of hardships and trials. I think of David, Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table in the presence of my enemies. David sounds like one who is at peace, even when life isn't peaceful. We can see Jesus, our Prince of Peace, demonstrate this in Matthew 26. He knows what's coming. The hour is near. And He knows that those who love Him, His disciples, His family, His friends, they're going to be devastated by what's about to happen because they don't get it yet. He knows what this is going to do to Peter when he disowns Him before this all happens. He knows what this is going to do to Judas, who is betraying Him. And all of that together, combined with the fact that He's going to the cross to scorn its shame, He is going to the cross to take on the wrath of God, and we see Jesus as flustered, as rattled as we see Him in the Gospels, here in Gethsemane. And he goes and He prays if there's any way at all this can be done a different way, please allow it. And each time he prays this, he ends it the same way. May your will be done. I fear that we often confuse peace for no problems. Peace and no problems are two different things. Peace can be obtained in the midst of problems. Jesus is distraught. He prays for this to be altered in some way at all. And then Judas comes. A resounding no from the Father. Judas comes with a crowd bearing torches and swords as if they're ready for a fight, for a rebellion. And Jesus then becomes maybe as cool, calm, and collected as we see him in the Gospels. As it seems he's diffusing the situation before it can ever get out of hand, Judas comes and he says, "Do what you've come for, friend." Doesn't even allow Judas to speak. Peter draws his sword and strikes Malchus, cutting off his ear. Jesus dismisses Peter. "Put your sword up." He puts Malchus' ear back on, which had to be a bizarre sight if you were present. That you're coming to capture this man and he's helping you get better. Had to be weird. And Jesus reminds them too, hey, if I wanted, I could call legions of angels. And this all would be over before it ever began. But he didn't. Because it wasn't God's will. He'd come to peace with God's will. He came to terms with what was to happen. Jesus had to go through Gethsemane. There was no avoiding that. He had to go to the cross. There was no avoiding that. As his follower, why would I think I'm any different? Why would I think I can avoid Gethsemane? Why would I think I can avoid the cross? Hardships are here. And the key to having peace in those moments is not learning how to avoid them. It's not learning how to avoid the Gethsemanes in our life. It's not learning how to avoid the valley of the shadow of death. The key to having peace in those moments, rather, is learning to go into Gethsemane and say, "Not my will, but yours be done." The key is entering the valley of the shadow of death, saying, "I will fear no evil, for you are with me." The key to having peace in the midst of hardships and trials is knowing who is going through them with you and trusting in His will and placing your life in Him. We will overcome. Life is going to deal us bad hands sometimes. We're going to have unspeakable tragedy, some of us. But we can have peace even in those moments. We can know that our victory has been secured. Those things that happen to us, they don't define us. That's not who makes us us. We have a victory in Christ. That is why we can have confidence in the face of such great hardships, in the face of such great trials. We have confidence in our victory because of Jesus. God's Son, our Lord, secured for us the victory already. He did for us what we were unable to do for ourselves. For to us, a child is born. To us, a son is given. The government will be on His shoulder. And His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Let's sing.